Let's take a deep breath as you settle comfortably in your chair, releasing any stress of the morning. Close your eyes if you're comfortable, and take another nice deep breath as we join our hearts in this quiet time together. As you take your next breath, I invite you to allow the power of God's grace into your heart. Grace is a demonstration of God's loving action in our lives. We can find it in so many ways. We find it when we walk through the beauty of nature, or in the faces of our loving pets. We can feel it as a strong healing energy that permeates every atom, cell, tissue, and organ in our bodies, renewing and revitalizing us. If situations seem less than ideal, or we feel apprehensive, or we can't give up the bitterness of a deep personal wound, we can release all to God. We can take comfort in the presence, in the power, and in the grace of God in this moment of silence. As we return our attention to this service, let us pray. Divine Spirit, I am open to and thankful for the grace you shower on me. I am receptive to experience grace in moments of inspiration, motivation, and even relaxation, as I gratefully rest in the awareness of your presence. For this and for so much more, I say thank you, God. Thank you, God. Amen.
The grass still grows in the spring, and the branches still reach their leaves high for the sun, and the warmth of summer blows upon the wind. Like a holy benediction, the rains will come again, and the grass still grows in the spring. In the dark and cold of winter, with her snow and bitter frost, when a flower's just a memory of the summer we have lost, 'neath the ice and frozen soil and the leaves the autumn's tossed, lies a tiny seed, all the hope we need, that the grass will grow in the spring, and the flower buds unfurl their petals to the sky, the breath of spirit felt upon the earth. Every seed and fruit a miracle of life reborn again, and the grass will grow in the spring. In the dark and cold of winter, with her snow and bitter frost, when a flower's just a memory of a summer we have lost, 'neath the ice and frozen soil and the leaves the autumn's tossed, lies a tiny seed, all the hope we need, that the grass still grows in the spring, and the circle of our life turns round and round again, from the green of spring to autumn's fading gold. And the shortest days of winter, when the earth seems gray and cold, then the grass will grow in the spring. In the dark and cold of winter, with her snow and bitter frost, when a flower's just a memory of a summer we have lost, 'neath the ice and frozen soil and the leaves the autumn's tossed, lies a tiny seed, all the hope we need.
Good morning. Good to see you today. Thank you so much for coming. How many are familiar with General George Patton? Oh, blood and guts. Very endearing name they gave him. But he was a great general and a key player in bringing down Hitler and Nazi Germany. He was also a great student of the history of warfare. During the battles of North Africa, one of Patton's earliest commands during the Second World War, his troops and tanks were engaged in a series of attacks and counterattacks with the German panzer divisions under the command of General Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, who's widely considered one of the greatest battlefield commanders. Patton's forces did not fall for one of Rommel's traps, and in fact successfully counterattacked and defeated the Germans. Patton watched the battle unfold. At the moment he saw the battle turn, he stood up in his staff car and cried out, "Rommel, I read your book! I read your book!" He's referring to a book Rommel wrote on the tank in warfare, and he had it translated in English and read every word of it. So he knew what his enemy would be up to in advance. And so because of his strategy, he was able to defeat him. I got to thinking, we looked at, not last Sunday, but the Sunday prior, a mini series on spiritual warfare and what that really means. And there are those that believe that it involves dealing with the devil and his buddies, demons. They consider that spiritual warfare. And there are those that even go so further as say, I see demons in you, and I got to take you down. But how many know that's not spiritual warfare at all? That has nothing to do with it. In fact, Unity's view on the devil is maybe a little different, but I think a lot of people appreciate. Reading from the Revealing Word, Mr. Fillmore, Unity founder Charles Fillmore wrote, the devil represents the massive thoughts that have been built up in human race consciousness through many generations of earthly experiences and crystallized into what may be termed human personality or carnal mind, which opposes and rejects God. The devil is a state of consciousness adverse to the divine good. Other names for this state of consciousness are the adversary, the carnal mind, the accuser, and the old man. There is no personal devil. God is the one omnipresent principle of the universe, and there is no room for any principle of evil personified or otherwise. So our battle, spiritual warfare, when we talk about it, we need to understand who the enemy is and where the battle is fought. And I got to tell you, it's not fought with an outside entity. It's one much closer to home, as we'll see. Because our mind, and I've heard this said, and I love this expression, our mind is the arena of faith. That's the arena where the battle is fought, isn't it? Say that with me. The mind is the arena of faith. Let's personalize it. My mind is my arena of faith, because it really is. This is where the battle is fought and won, isn't it? And it's interesting, when we win here, when we prevail in our minds, how much better things go in relationships, in interaction, with dealing with unpleasant people, because we're no longer seeing the devil in them, but we're seeing there's something going on in our arena that we need to deal with. Isn't that true? And these people just kind of bring that out. Think, well, they're just nasty people sent to harass me. It could be that they're blessings that are coming to you to help you assess, okay, why am I reacting like this? What's going on in the arena of faith in my mind? That's where spiritual warfare is, isn't it? The enemy is our mind, our own unenlightened thinking. That's our enemy, not outside entities or other people. When we get to thinking our enemy is people, how many know that's detrimental to the harmony of the human family? We get to seeing somebody else as our problem. How many know the problem is in the mirror? Look carefully, isn't that right? And the arena is right here, and that's where we will fight, and that's where we'll win. But we got to know, like Patton, we need to know what our enemy, how he operates. Isn't that right? So we can say to our Rommel, I read your book. I know how to deal with you. And so we need to understand these principles. So again, this is part 2 of my little series on friends in high places, ? And let me recap a little bit for you that either weren't here or have already completely forgotten what I said before, which is thoroughly possible. I know Carolyn frequently forgets things I say. And so I can't blame you. But let's look at the metaphysical significance. We were looking at King Josiah in the Jewish scriptures. And we use terms in Unity and sometimes don't tell people what they mean. So let me say, metaphysical means a looking beyond the physical or the literal into a deeper meaning. Isn't that true? There are places in Scripture, you take them literally, and they are either really scary or really boring. But when you look at them metaphysically, you see something deeper and more and stronger. And so we were looking at the metaphysical significance of King Josiah. And as I said last time, Josiah was the 16th king of Judah. As you probably know, Israel, after the reign of Solomon, it was divided from 10 tribes in the north, 2 tribes in the south. The 10 northern tribes were called Israel. The 2 southern tribes were called Judah. And it was actually 2, Judah and Benjamin, but they were known as the kingdom of Judah. And so Josiah was the 16th king of Judah. And he took the throne at the age of 8 after the assassination of his father, King Amon. And Josiah, as we looked at last time, he did something nobody before him had done. Not David, not Solomon, not any of them. He destroyed the high places. And we looked at what significance of the high places was. It sounds good. Who doesn't want to be in a high place? But these high places were not good. They were actually erected by the Canaanite people that surrounded Israel to their particular Canaanite deities. And they would erect these places in the mountains or the hills because it was believed these deities dwelled at higher elevations. So if you want to hang with them, you got to build a high place for them. And the people of Judah said, hey, they got high places there, God. Why can't we have high places? We ought to have high places. So they started making high places too. The thing is, Yahweh, the Hebrew name for God, Yahweh never ordered high places, never approved of them. They were never God's idea. They were never a divine idea. It was people trying to keep up with their neighbors. How many know that can be exhausting? You ever tried that? And that's what they were doing, and it was a bad idea that got even worse because eventually these high places degenerate into human and child sacrifice. So how many know a bad idea seldom gets any better? It gets worse. Isn't that right? And that's what happened with high places. But Josiah was the first one to come along and said, these high places have got to go. That's it. They're done. Tear them down. And so there's a metaphysical significance in recognizing what our high places are and the point in time when we say, enough, you got to go. So let's look at that. We looked at that a little bit last time. Josiah said, enough, they're going down. And he began to order that they be dismantled. And as I like to say, high places were actually low places that brought people down. And this is one I made up, so I take full credit for this. When you quote it, say, my reverend said this. Said, when low places become high places, our lives are turned upside down. Isn't that cool? I thought that, that's cool that I thought that. So I'll say it again. When low places become high places, our lives are turned upside down. And so that's why we want to take down the high places that come into our arena of faith in our minds. How many remember when Bill Clinton and Al Gore were running for president, vice president of the United States? How many remember that contest? Al made a speech that's very applicable to what we're talking about today. You might remember it. He said, in comparing, the administration of the time, President George H.W. Bush, he said, right now, everything that should be up is down. Everything that should be down is up. And so that's very applicable to what we're talking about when we compare low and high places. And things that are high places in our minds are actually low, and we got to take them down. We got to go Josiah on them, I like to say. And so what is low down and destructive can become prominent and very high in our consciousness, in our minds. So what are the high places we must deal with? Well, again, quoting Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, he said, indeed, we live as humans, but we do not wage war according to human standards. We don't fight battles like General Patton did, with men, with machinery, with weaponry like that. That's not our fight, you see, not spiritual warfare. We live as humans, but do not wage war according to human standards. See, when people start striking out at other people, that's not spiritual warfare, is it? For the weapons of our warfare are not merely human, but they have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every high thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey the Christ. And this is very interesting. In the original Greek, when he talks about taking every thought captive, literally it meant prisoners of war. Our thoughts, think of them in terms of catching prisoners of war. The enemies that are out to get us, we got to corral them, and we got to trap them. Isn't that right? How many know sometimes they escape? You got to get them again. Isn't that right? How many of you ever, you've corralled a thought, you think you got it under control, the next thing you know, here it is again. Catch that sucker again. Don't be like Colonel Klink and Stalag 13, where they're all running around loose and free. We got to take control of our thoughts, take them captive, literally, and make them obey our will. Now here, Paul gave a progression in reverse order. He talked about strongholds. He talked about arguments and thoughts. That's actually reverse order. It starts out with thoughts, develops into arguments, and ultimately can become a stronghold, which makes it even tougher to take down. But this is the warfare we're talking about that conquers all others. When we deal with our thoughts, arguments, and strongholds, then we understand spiritual warfare and we are able to prevail and bring great improvement to our lives and blessing to the lives of other people. This is the progression of high places. It starts out with thoughts that are opposed to the Christ. Thoughts are like, you're such a loser. Nothing works out for you. Nobody loves you. These are thoughts we must make our prisoner because they're all lies. They're all lies, and they're all designed to bring us down. They can become high in our consciousness, but they're low down, and we need to take them there, don't we? We must make these thoughts our prisoners. And you only catch the thoughts you're after. How many know that's true? We can let our thoughts run wild, like the Buddha talked about monkey mind, where they're just all over the place, and we're not taking them captive. We're not holding them, accountable for what they're doing. How many remember the movie The Shawshank Redemption? Has everybody seen it? Anybody not seen it? A few of you. I don't mean to spoil it for you, but then I got to think, if you haven't seen it by now, you're probably not going to. So it doesn't matter. But if you remember one of the heroes of the story, Red, remember Red, who was in prison with Andy? And he's released. And he tries to go straight, and he realizes he's too institutionalized. He's not going to make it on the outside. He starts plotting for ways he can get himself sent back to prison. And then he gets an invitation to Mexico. I won't tell you why he's going to Mexico, so that won't spoil it for you. But he decides to go to Mexico, violate his parole, and just take off. But he says something very interesting. He said, I don't think there'll be any roadblocks for an old broken-down con like me. In other words, they won't be looking for me. They won't care. And our thoughts, like Red, if we're not looking for them, if we're not keeping an eye out, if we're not wary, we won't catch them. And they'll prevail. They'll keep running around in our minds. Isn't that true? So it starts out with thoughts, which we must take captive like prisoners of war. Secondly, their arguments. Some people take this as the power to argue with people. How many know that's not a power? That's a sickness. Is that right? Nastiness is not a superpower. And being able to fuss with people does not make you great. It means you need help. Isn't that true? So it's not talking about that. Some people take great pride in their ability to argue and insult people. There's no pride in that. There's a need for therapy. Isn't that right? That's what there's a need for. But arguments in this sense means it refers to like arguments in court between attorneys, between advocate and accuser. The defense is the advocate for the accused, isn't that right? And then there's the prosecution who brings the accusation. And they both hope that their arguments will prevail with the jury, and the jury, the defense hopes his argument will get his client acquitted, and the prosecutor hopes his argument will get him convicted. And there is that same thing going on in the arena of our minds. We can either be our own advocate or we can be our own accuser. And too often we're our own accuser. Why do we do that? We make arguments against ourselves in our minds, don't we? Here's why you're a failure. Here's why you're never going to win out in life. We make these ridiculous arguments in our minds. And we need to be our advocate, not our accuser. So often here's all the facts that prove you're a loser. Look at all of the losing you've done in your life. And if we let this argument prevail, how many know it will bring a verdict that will make us ineffective in living our best life, won't it? Here are all the facts. How about another set of facts where we look, where we did prevail, where we did win, where we did do better? How about compiling an argument there for ourselves? But arguments, form in our minds, you see. And as thoughts run loose and then these arguments come up, and suddenly we are not an advocate for ourselves at all. We're just in the business of accusing ourselves. Deepak Chopra said in The Third Jesus, there is a constant, instantaneous calculus taking place with your every thought, word, and action. And that's so true. Every thought we think, every word we speak, every deed we perform, it creates a calculus or an argument forming in ourselves that tells us, it's supposed to tell us who and what we are. Let's make that argument in our favor and quit making it against us. What do you say? Remembrances, remembering where we goofed up. And somehow in our minds that can become who we are. Look how you failed. That's you. How about going over here? Wait a minute. Why does that have to stay me? It may have been me then, but it don't have to be me now, does it? No. We can do different. We can do better. We can form an argument in our favor. That internal calculus can be for us and not against us. So much of our behavior is characterized by self-criticism and self-blame. We need to stop beating ourselves up for past mistakes. A new minister used to say, folks, how about giving yourself a massive break for once? I like that, don't you? Because the goal in the Hebrew is moksha, or release. Through many unfoldings and revelations along the way of life, we learn to release things. We learn to release the past. We learn to release hurts and resentments and things that have happened to us. And we recently had a releasing workshop. How many were in that? You know, I got so sick of that lady saying, you ready to release that? She said over and over and over, I finally got it. Yeah, that's exactly really all I need to do. Turn that loose. Quit holding on to it. It was really liberating. We learned to release along the way. And we learn to release thoughts and arguments that are not in our favor. As advocates, we need to make a better argument for ourselves, don't we? Remember the O.J. Simpson trial? How many remember that? Remember it seemed like it would never end? I remember a guy talked to me. He said, I'm thinking of going to law school. I said, get started now. By the time the trial is over, you'll be ready to be, his new defense attorney, because it seemed like it would never end. And the verdict on that, whether you agree with it or not, I personally didn't agree with it. But the point is that a better argument to the jury, a better argument was made by the defense than by the prosecution. I remember when that verdict came out, it was very controversial. And right after it came out, I was supposed to go on a trip with a group of black men to an event in Atlanta. I was the only white guy in sight. It was a manpower with Bishop T.D. Jakes. And at the time, there were practically no white guys involved in it. So I thought this was going to be a real neat experience. And they said they could see me anywhere in the auditorium. At the time, I had this beautiful head of blonde hair. Oh, God, I miss it. And I had this red sport coat and this white skin, and said anywhere I was in the arena, said, look, there's Mickey over there. They could see me so clearly. But I remember this was right after the verdict, and the controversy was real fresh. And I went with the guy who headed up the group was the pastor, Pastor Van, good friend of mine. And one of the guys finally asked me, I hope that I could avoid this, but eventually it came about. He said, what do you think about the O.J. verdict? I said, I think whatever Pastor Van thinks. Ask him. Avoided that. But it's very controversial. But the point is that the defense made a better argument to the jury than the prosecution made. We need to make a better argument for ourselves. Isn't that true? And we got to ask ourselves, what do I keep arguing in my mind that causes these strongholds to develop? Stronghold is the ultimate place where you've developed a pattern of thinking that seems like it's just a part of who you are. I did that. I mentioned last time. I developed a stronghold due to the experiences of my childhood. When my mother was married to an abusive man, that she would leave him and then she'd end up going back. And this was back and forth, back and forth. And every time she'd leave, I got my hopes up that life would be better now. And when she'd go back, once again, here we are. And that developed a stronghold in my mind that said, even if things seem to be getting better, they're going to be bad again. And that's a stronghold that I had to deal with. And to some extent, still do. But I go Josiah on it when it comes up. Life's going to be bad again. No. I go Josiah. That's how you go Josiah on it. You get really mean. It's your thoughts, not other people. So we can reverse this terrible process to keep strongholds either from developing or we can tear them down. Again, Unity founder Charles Fillmore said, the purging of Judah and Jerusalem in the 12th year of Josiah's reign signifies a systematic denial of errors of thought and practice that had become habitual in both the objective and subjective consciousness. It's habit, you see, it forms. And if we don't do anything about it, it'll just prevail and keep on like it is. He said, after purging the mind of error by denial, we should see to it we put builders to work upon the temple of our lives. These builders are called affirmations. Unity's big on denials and affirmations, and they're very valuable tools. Now, when we talk about denial, we're talking about we deny bad things happen, because that would be silly. We're not denying that they happen. We're not denying there are bad things. We deny their power to prevail in our lives, don't we? That's what we deny. Denial, according to Mr. Fillmore, is the mental process of erasing from consciousness the false beliefs of the sense mind. Denial clears away belief in evil as a reality and makes room for the establishing of truth. As we say, we believe that evil is not a presence, but rather the absence of something. Evil is not a presence, but the absence. It's the absence of good, isn't it? Now, I know if you get your car, if your car gets carjacked, you're not going to enter into the debate right away. I wonder, was that the force of evil that made him do that or the absence of good? You're not going to think that. You just know your car is gone. But I think it is important to understand that evil is not a presence, but an absence. It has no power in and of itself. It is because good is not in place. And as we insert good into the world, how many know evil dissipates? Just as light's coming on in a dark room, the darkness is not a thing in itself. It's the absence of the light, isn't it? And so cold is the absence of heat. Cold is not an entity. It's the absence of something. Drought, which we could use more rain. Isn't that right? Drought is not a force or a power. It's the absence of rain. And poverty is not a power. It's the absence of opportunity or the ability to do something with yourself. So we deny the concept of evil as a force, and we deny the power of the negative. We need to go Josiah on thoughts like that, because there are many negative thought patterns that try to prevail in our minds. Mr. Fillmore said we should see to it we put the builders to work on the temple of our lives. Now, it's not enough just to deny things. We got to affirm something too. How many know there are a lot of people tell you what they're against? Well, what are you for? And they draw a blank. A lot of churches tell you all these things they're against in our society. But does that really matter as much as what we stand for? That's what counts, isn't it? That's what's going to make the difference. And it's not enough to deny our negative thoughts. We need to put something constructive in their place, don't we? Such as the precious promises of Scripture and other sacred writings, and even secular writings. There are inspirational things we can draw. Isn't that true? From great minds and great. Teddy Roosevelt's got one of my favorites about the arena. It's not the critic who counts, but the one who's in the arena. I love that. It's immensely inspiring. We need to continue to affirm those things in our lives. I got a book called The Parallel Sayings of Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and Lao Tzu. And I can draw so much inspiration from that. How many know we got to look for stuff like that? Nobody's going to bring it to you, isn't that right? What you see on TV is probably not going to do that for you. Coke is it. Yay. How many know that's not really going to inspire you for day-to-day living? Is it? We need to look for these things, read and study these things. Affirm things like that. I have a mantra that I love, that I am confident, kind, and courageous. I am. Because those are things I value. I value being a confident, kind, and courageous person. And so I affirm that about me. I am the light of the world. Jesus said that about me, so I say that too. I am the light of the world. I dwell in the secret place of the Most High. I'm special. Huh? You're special too. Not just me. You already knew I was, but you may not know you are too. Isn't that right? But it's funny, the things we say that, like I said, being hung by our own tongue. Stuff we say like, how many of you, do you use this one? This is where I came from. It's a big one. Oh, that just tickled me to death. You ever say that? Why do we say stuff like that? Isn't that a grim statement when you think about it? I laughed so much I died. That's terrible, man. How about I laughed so much I came into a newer expression of life? What's wrong with that? Why do we say stuff like that? But we say stuff of a negative nature, and it's not good for us, is it? It hangs in your consciousness, doesn't it? And when we equate laughter with death, that's not good. I'll tell you something that you'll never hear me say. You'll never hear me say I'm sick. You'll never hear me say you're sick. You know what I say? I say I'm battling illness. I figure if I'm battling it, it hadn't won yet, so it hadn't prevailed, so I won't claim to be sick. Likewise with you. Somebody, how they doing? They're battling this or the other. Means that I believe you're going to come out ahead of it, on top of it. See the difference in mindset between, oh, I'm sick, oh, God, I'm sick. And, or rather, I'm battling this thing, man. I'm determined to whip it. Dr. Peter's story is incredibly inspiring. Coming back from blindness, just an incredible story. If you haven't read his book, what's it called again? I read it a while back. I don't remember the title. Open My Eyes. Excellent book. Highly recommend it. Talk about a man who struggled and prevailed. Incredible story. This man never gave in, even when he was facing blindness. And we cave under a cold. You ever seen anybody? Oh, God, I'm sick. You know, they got a runny nose. Come on, man, get with it. So we need to practice denials and affirmations. Isn't that true? Let me give you some examples of good and bad ways to do that. Here's a good denial. I deny anger's power to control my behavior. I mean, that's a good denial. I deny that rather than I got a bad temper. My daddy had a bad temper. My granny, we all have bad tempers. That's a terrible affirmation. But rather I deny the power of my family to keep me upset. I deny anger's power to control my behavior. Now, here's a bad denial. I am not going to go off on Jim even though he is a jerk. How many know that's not a good denial? That just reinforces the negative power of your interaction with Jim, right? Not a good one. Here's a good affirmation. I affirm that the peace that passes all understanding is abiding in me. That's very good. Here's one that's very bad. I have a bad temper, but I'm holding it in. How many know that's not helping? How many know eventually it's going to bust? So there's good and bad ways to affirm and deny. Isn't that true? We want to do it right, don't we? Because these are helpful tools. They're not cure-alls. I'm not saying, oh, just make your affirmation. Everything's great. No, it has to become a practice, a habit of life. Isn't that true? I've made affirmation that seemed to start getting worse. But how many know you write it out? You walk it out. And you find ultimately you do prevail, don't you? And it's so cool. Stand with me if you would. So through denials and affirmations, we establish genuine high places in us, good and genuine high places that prevail and make us live our highest and best. Stand with me if you would. Let's make our affirmation in closing. This is another good one too. Repeat after me. I am making a case for me.
I am making a case for me.
I deny the accusations from the past. I affirm the truth of my divine goodness. I am a true high place. That sounds good. Bless you. You can have your seats. Thank you so much.